people are fearful of having real talk that isn't just around positive emotion at work.
Yeah.
Whether it's a personal struggle or a work struggle. Yeah, 63% of people fear basically expressing emotion like stress, frustration, anger. They are concerned it will be viewed as unprofessional.
Yeah.
And other research finds, which I found fascinating, that the average person says I'm fine 14 times a week, but only means it 19% of the time.
Wow.
So we really we still feel we have to put on that work armor, right? As Brene Brown calls it, we still feel like we have to armor up a lot.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group, and we're back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean, and we talk about what you might do about them. So joining me today is Kelly Mackin. Kelly is the CEO of Motives Met. She's a human behavior researcher, and she's author of the book, Work Life Well Lived. Welcome, Kelly. It's great to have you.
Thank you. So excited to be here today.
Yeah. Shout out to Megan for introducing us at the beginning of this year, because I loved the conversation that we had, so much so that I thought we really should share this with my audience. I mean, we love a good human behavior story, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, with the world a little upside down right now, well-being and thriving at work, a place where we spend 35% of our waking hours, is a pretty important topic. So I thought we'd give the audience some personal as well as some professional support today. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
I love that plan. That's perfect.
Awesome. Then let's get into the huddle. So clearly I did not do your intro justice. I know you've had a good career. Tell us a bit about your background and what motivated you to found Motives Met, because I think you had a pretty different career trajectory before that, right?
Yes. Well, really, my story stems all the way back from growing up as a kid, watching my mom go from at one point thriving at work to just complete misery at work. And obviously, it's really difficult to see, especially because work has the potential to be such a source of joy and well-being. And so I saw that side of it. And then I saw how it can have this detrimental effect on really your whole life, because as you said, so much of our waking time is spent at work. My mom was a real trailblazer woman of her time. She was senior vice president of research at one of the largest global advertising agencies, and really one of the only women in the room at that time as a VP. And I just was so in awe of her and inspired. And I couldn't understand why someone who gave so much to her work and to her company could be treated in such an awful way. Because when her company got bought out, everything in the culture changed. And unfortunately, I found myself following in similar footsteps. I ended up in the agency world in Chicago. I call it like Mad Men for modern times. It was whiskey before noon to deal with impossible clients. Shouting matches and slamming doors was it was literally completely normal. I pulled more all-nighters for work than I can even count. And it took me hitting some really ugly lows before I woke up and got clarity that we all deserve well-being at work, that well-being is a right, it's not a privilege.
Yeah.
And really that just set me on a trajectory in my life to move from Chicago to California, pursue well-being, both personally and professionally. And then really, I ended up helping people pursue it in theirs. So I dove a lot deeper into research, which is a big part of my background. I think growing up, watching my mom and all her research, I was destined to love insights, but I wanted to understand the deeper side of things. So I also moved into psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness and meditation and coaching. And then really when the work well-being movement became underway, my mom and I wanted to be part of it. And really, we just started by asking ourselves, well, what does thriving at work even mean? What does it even mean to have well-being at work? And just that researcher curiosity in us is what sparked the entire platform that's Motives Met today, though we couldn't have guessed at the time would be where we'd end up.
Yeah. It's a lot of, it sounds like, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way sometimes, maybe not all the time, but it's more surviving versus thriving. And if we really want to deliver good results in our jobs, and we all do, right? We all want to be successful. We all want to do good things. We all want to be, seen and heard. We want to be thriving, not surviving.
Yes. Yeah. And people today are really realizing that, which is a huge shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it has become such a hot topic of conversation, that hearts and minds have really changed. The pandemic really opened people's eyes to going, oh, in a lot of ways, work can be better. They saw what it was like to be home with their family for dinner instead of commuting in traffic. They saw what it was like to not be in person around their micromanaging boss all day, or maybe their gossiping, bullying coworkers. And so people really do kind of demand and deserve well-being in a way that hasn't really been there before. And that's one of the many reasons why, smart leaders in companies are really paying attention.
Yeah. And it's more than, we've been talking about work-life balance since the 90s, right? I mean, for the last 25 years, we've added access to the internet, email, cell phones. It's almost impossible now to be offline, right? You're working in bed at night when you go to sleep, or in the morning when you wake up. Things are just, it's just very different. And this is not just about work-life balance. I think work-life balance is important, but this is, how you integrate these two parts of your life, right? And whether you integrate them and how you do that. I think somebody was telling me there's a new show on TV. I don't know if you've watched it, but I can't remember what it's called now. It's on Apple, and it's something like when they're at work, they can't remember what life is like at home. And when they're at home, yes, when they're at home, how could I forget that name? And then when they're at home, they can't remember what happens at work. How bizarre is that? But, I guess, some people may want to turn that off. What are your thoughts on that? There's this sort of harmony, disharmony thing going on, right? How is this different?
Well, I've done a lot of research into, we kind of prefer the term work-life harmony over balance, but there's a lot of myths around work-life harmony that really don't do us any favors. One of them being, it actually is not the end-all be-all to work well-being. So work-life harmony is something that is one of the 28 building blocks of thriving at work. And that's essentially what our research shows. And I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about this. But work-life harmony is just one of the 28. And what our research shows is that we all have a few of these motives, as we call them, psychological and emotional and social needs, that really rise to the top and drive our well-being and performance at work today. But of course, what's really driving you most is going to be different than what's driving me most. And it's not about any one motive. It's not about any one of our human needs. It's about focusing on our most important collective needs today. So work-life harmony may be a top motivator for you, but what about maybe your other 4 top human needs? Mm-hmm. You could have all the harmony in the world, but if you feel insecure instead of secure at work, and that's a top need for you, if you are bored to death and variety is a big driver for you, right? Like if your other top needs are surviving it's not enough. So we tend to take this very one size fits all approach in the world, or this is the golden ticket. And, internets on the or articles on the internet love to do that, right? Like, these are the three things your employees need. This is the one thing you need to do to be happy and healthy at work.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. So sometimes we put too much weight on work-life harmony alone. Also knowing that sometimes we do have to have a little bit of imbalance to maybe pursue some of our other needs like growth or innovation or a goal. And that's okay, as long as we make sure that imbalance doesn't go too low. So sometimes people can really be judged either way. You work too much or you're not working enough. Right? I mean, it's like the struggle I swear every, especially mom I talk to, I feel guilty because I'm not at the soccer game because I'm working, but you know what? Maybe I don't even want to be at the soccer game. But if I'm working, I feel like I should be at the soccer game. And it's just this kind of internal battle because we think we should be doing it a certain way.
Yeah.
But really what our research shows is that well-being and whether work-life balance is a top driver of that or not is very personal to each person. So what that ideal harmony looks like for you is going to be really different than someone else, and that's okay. And if we can really kind of limit that judgment, that's when we're going to be able to have better work relationships where we understand where people are coming from a little bit more. And the last kind of thing I'll mention there is our research shows that there are people who are integrators and separators and kind of a blend of the two. So some people are like me. I started work today at 4:30 in the morning. I will work till like 1 p.m. I will take the afternoon off. I will come back and do emails later at night. That's how I work best. That's how I harmonize. Someone else, much better as a separator. They want to clock in at a specific time, clock out at a specific time, not look at their email. Neither way is right. It's about what works best for you, what works best for your team, and getting everybody to kind of understand that about one another.
Yeah. Well, and I would think too that our work-life harmony changes over time, right? It depends on the current circumstances, right? Like maybe it depends on the specific job. Maybe it depends on what's happening in your personal life. You're getting married or you're having a child or your parents are moving in with you or whatever the case might be. There's things that are happening over your lifetime. So your work-life harmony is going to change. So having sort of a model or an approach that sort of helps you manage that, I think would be a really good thing.
Yes, it's seasons of life, right? Like personally, professionally. And that's what our data shows with all these needs is it's kind of knowing where am I at today in this season of my work life, knowing that a year from now or 5 years from now, it may change. What you needed most 10 years ago may be different than what you need today. And there may be some similarities because we all have certain needs that are really tied to our values and sense of self. And those may kind of tend to rise to the top over time. But exactly, you might be in a season like I was last year, publishing my book and running Motives Met and I didn't have a lot of work-life harmony, but I was never more fulfilled in my career because future success was one of my big top needs. And my dream had always been to publish this book. So of course I had to make sure I wasn't hitting burnout or it wasn't too low, but I went, that's okay that this year isn't about balance for me. But this year, it's very different. A lot of my other goals and time spent is not towards a work goal. It's more towards personal goals. So I love that you mentioned that because taking this approach of its seasons of life and it's going to ebb and flow is really important for well-being.
Yeah. Let's talk about the human needs assessment, I think is something that you created for your analysis and for the research. How is that different from other workplace assessment tools? Like what does it tell us? Like what makes it different?
Our assessment is based on the 28 motives that I mentioned. So really stemming back to my mom and I going, what the heck is thriving at work, right? Like clearly we're focusing more on well-being, which is great, and a people-first culture and mental health. But our data shows only 16% of people are truly thriving at work. So clearly we're missing the mark, but before we can get to where we want to go, we have to figure out what we're even measuring, right? Like what we're even talking about. And we did a lot of research and uncovered that there are 28 motives that are at the heart of thriving at work. And we have this great colored framework that makes it easy to grasp these 28 motives that fall into these 10 overarching buckets. For example, passion and purpose are motives in the meaning domain. Work-life harmony is a motive, self-esteem, free expression, flexibility, autonomy. But again, the data showed we have to take a much more individualized approach and not this kind of one size fits none approach. Even as an individual, if you want to have a thriving career, there is everyone around you telling you what you should want and need, right? Steve Jobs in his famous commencement speech is saying, if you don't find purpose, if you're not living your purpose, you're going to be miserable. Forget about it, right? And you have one influencer on social media saying it's hustling to reach your potential, grow and thrive. And then a different one's like, no, forget about the hustle, focus on work-life balance or go somewhere where you're appreciated.
Well, we constantly measure ourselves against everyone else too, especially now with social media. It's like,
yes,
oh, I haven't been promoted yet, and all my friends have been promoted, or like, do I have to work harder to get that, right?
Yes. Is that it? I need to hustle harder and then I'll get to that place of thriving, right? And even we're grown up in different cultures or families and different belief systems, which I've seen a lot of. I grew up in a family where it was security. I should focus on be a doctor, be a lawyer, be something that is a secure, stable job path, and do not focus on your purpose. Where some people grew up in a household where it was like, you have to find your one true calling. And there's this pressure of like, well, what if I don't have one, right? And so we went, this is part of the problem, is that we're kind of like drowning in information, but starving for real wisdom. And when we realized that we all have different needs out of these 28 that rise to the top and drive us today, I kind of call it your own personal cocktail, your own personal blend out of these 28 of like must-haves, nice to haves, and then like, I don't really care about it.
Yeah.
So there is no set hierarchy of needs. It's determining what your needs hierarchy is. And that's why we created our assessment and algorithm to really help people and teams focus on what is really driving me most today, so that I can focus on getting those needs met and also really expand my mindset to go, as I think about my career, for example, these needs are going to ebb and flow over time. And these 28 motives are these building blocks for me to consider. And it's not going to be perfect because these needs hold tension with one another. And so we take a very much more realistic approach than what I call like the work happiness delusion that a lot of the world wants to throw on you. And just saying, oh, just have this or get this, and then everything's going to be great. Or as a leader, hey, just get your team, give them purpose and just keep putting, kudos hashtags in the Slack channel and you're good to go. And we're like, well, we'll be the bearer of bad news. That's not true. But when we can take a much more realistic approach, saying needs are going to hold tension internally in ourselves and externally in our work relationships, how can we be strategic, make tough choices, compromise, communicate to make it the best it can be? Yeah. And that's really what our assessment helps people do. Go, what are the top 5 motives I need most to thrive? And then how am I going to better meet those motives for myself, the people I work with, and the people that I lead?
Yeah. Yeah. Because we do have, as individuals, we have a responsibility for our own happiness and our ability to thrive, whether we feel like people are standing in our way or, whatever the case might be, nobody cares about, me and how I'm doing at work. It's partly on me, but I do think obviously, organizations, they want to get the best from their employees and as well as managers. Like let's talk a minute about the responsibilities at the organizational level and the leadership level, right? Because, we as leaders see people, we talk to people every day. We also have to be looking at, what's happening on the ground and how can I help people? Because a lot of times I see the best way for me to help people is removing obstacles, right? Whether they're personal or professional, if I can remove that obstacle, they can thrive. So let's talk a little bit about that perspective and kind of how you guys see that from the perspective of the organization and the leader.
A really important mindset shift that I always dive deep into with leaders and teams is going from this idea that a thriving culture is on you as a leader to a thriving culture is co-created. Everybody owns culture. So as a leader, you absolutely have an immense responsibility to lead the charge, but well-being at work is co-created. So we say take any of these motives, whether it's growth, innovation, flexibility, free expression, fairness, the degree that that need is going to be healthy, the degree it'll be thriving or suffering is going to be dependent on so many people, the individual, right? Coworkers, clients, leadership, processes, HR. So if you really want to create a workplace where people can thrive, you need to lead a team-wide movement, a company-wide movement where people take accountability and responsibility and ownership and the opportunity to really make an impact because they do. So it was interesting. I actually had one director say, oh my gosh, like these 28 motives are like the Everest of leadership. And I love a good mountain analogy. And I was like, you know what? You're right. They are. Because again, it's not like just do these 5 things or focus on these 2 things. But I said, you're not meant to make the climb alone, right? Like you have to lead this expedition, but getting everyone on board to walk what we kind of have as our 5-step pathway to understand, be mindful of, evaluate, communicate, and ultimately meet these motives is a joint effort and responsibility. But it won't happen without leadership. It won't happen without organizations being intentional and getting people on board to do that and to really care about other people's needs at work. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah. It's interesting, like organizations, they try all sorts of things. Like I was reading an article that said Daimler deletes all employee emails that people receive while they're on holiday. I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't know if they're still doing that, but I read this in an article, which I thought was fascinating, right? Like you get 1,000 emails while you're on vacation and great. Yeah, I got to enjoy my vacation, but now I got to come back and spend, 3 days digging out from under this pile of things that, I'm totally disconnected from at this point. Another one was, I think it was Virgin Mobile or one of the Virgin companies introduced like a 2-hour per week email ban for senior management. Another one blocks emails after somebody's shift has ended or after the end of the day. It kind of blocks them until the next day. Those are just like little things, right? But it's broader than that. It's really understanding your people. And if you think about it, that is a huge goal and challenge of the leadership, because you're not hiring people to tell them what to do, right? If you're hiring people that you have to tell what to do, you're hiring the wrong people. A lot of your job is really, how do I make this an environment that people can get done the work that they need to get done and take us to the next level?
Yes, and getting everyone on board to do that. And I love that you brought up those examples, because there can be small things, right, that you can do to help support these needs and thus support your people at work. But sometimes things are really much more of a Band-Aid solution. We find if you don't create this shared meaning and mindset with everyone in your organization, that again, a thriving culture is one where everybody's got to step up, care for these 28 needs, get to know each other as human beings, learn how to, live in the tension of these needs well. It doesn't really matter. Those things aren't going to go that far. For example, the right to disconnect laws. We in our research even ask people like, hey, how would you feel about really making it essentially, illegal to have certain communications after work? And there were some, I don't remember the percentages off the top of my head, but there was a percentage of people that said, that sounds great. I would love rigid laws. Most people wanted communication norms.
I saw that number. It was under 30%. I was kind of surprised it was as high as it was, but Yeah, I think it was like 29%, if
Yeah.
I'm remembering the data
Yeah,
right.
that sounds about right. But most people went, I want to just feel like I don't have to be online all the time and
Yeah.
accessible. So great. There were also, we did a lot of attitude statements, and it was essentially the insight was great. You could put rules in place all you want, but if I know my manager is expecting this of me, or great, I know that at 9 a.m. my inbox is going to be flooded once it turns on with 300 messages, because it doesn't solve the deeper problem, right? It's just
Yeah.
slapping a Band-Aid on it. So you have to really change that belief system at the core. Otherwise, all of these other things really don't create much of an impact for lasting change.
Yeah. We use a tool internally that we really like, and it helps us. You take little assessments like DISC and a few others that are kind of help you understand the person. And so you can kind of get to know each person in a little bit different way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm thinking about something as simple as sending emails to people after hours. I know I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I think, okay, I'm going to set that to go out tomorrow. I really like now that it reminds you of that every time you go to send something after 5. It's like, do you want to send this tomorrow? And, just simple things like that we're thinking about. I mean, yes, you can tell the person, hey, don't worry about responding to me after hours. That's just me. I like to get the emails out or whatever. But it's probably more incumbent upon me to think about that and be more cognizant of that, because some people are just going to stress over that regardless, right?
Well, I think that's why communication's so important. That's why we say, like, create a team communication
Yeah.
document together where everybody talks. Because there are people like me who do not, I prefer to not get my email flooded at once with I send emails later at night. I'm good with it. And
Yeah.
people on my team kind of know that. And I know people on my team who are more separators versus integrators. And that's the thing, when you talk about it and you get to understand people's styles, and then you write down what the communication norms are, what we anticipate for response times on different communication channels. It's a really simple exercise to create one of these. But when you do it as a team, it's really cool. You get to understand each other, and you make it clear as day, because we find a lot of times we think people can read our minds, especially as a leader or manager, and they can't. So just having it really clear on paper, cool, this is how we communicate. We all have different styles. This is what's expected. This is what's left up to people to decide. And this is what works for our team based on who we are. That's what matters most.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. I think the other thing is people, one of the biggest things that stresses people is when they've got something personal going on in their personal life, right? They're not comfortable necessarily talking about it. I mean, unless it's a death in the family where you're like, I have to be off, got to go to a funeral. There's a lot of things that go on that are outside of the realm of that are just every day. I think one of the other stats I read in one of your articles or some of your research was over 60% of people aren't even comfortable having that conversation with their boss. That number's disturbing.
Yes. And in general, people are fearful of having real talk that isn't just around positive emotion at work.
Yeah.
Whether it's a personal struggle or a work struggle. Yeah, 63% of people fear basically expressing emotion like stress, frustration, anger. They are concerned it will be viewed as unprofessional.
Yeah.
And other research finds, which I found fascinating, that the average person says I'm fine 14 times a week, but only means it 19% of the time.
Wow.
So we still feel we have to put on that work armor, right? As Brene Brown calls it, we still feel like we have to armor up a lot.
Yeah.
And it's important, if we want well-being at work, that we can be human at work. And that includes that full spectrum of human emotion. So it's emotional intelligence, but it's also that emotional inclusion part that tends to be left out a lot. because you want people to be having a better emotional experience.
Yeah.
But if people can't express, they're afraid to fail. If they can't express, they're angry because something's unfair. If they can't communicate in those ways, then you don't have a positive culture. You have one full of toxic positivity. And that is a big roadblock for thriving at work.
Yeah. What role do you see the HR team playing in all of this?
Well, potentially a big one, in the sense of, if you're someone who is leading the culture initiative at your company, I mean, it's such an amazing opportunity to make such a big impact. And it's really tough, because I work with so many HR managers that face different obstacles. Some of them work with leaders who love the idea of a thriving culture. They want it. They want their team to be happy and healthy. And they just are kind of like most leaders or managers of just going, I'm not really given the tools. I don't really have the training per se to kind of do that. And it's a different skill set than just kind of focus. There's a lot more training on leadership alone, and not as much leading a thriving team, a thriving culture, specifically that well-being, mental health piece.
Yeah.
And some HR managers are up against managers and leaders who don't get it still. They don't get why they should focus on health and happiness for their people. And it's not that they necessarily don't care, but they don't get why it should be a focus or why it should be their job and their responsibility. And that is a tougher nut to crack. And I find that data tends to help sometimes to get those people to understand. Unfortunately, well-being at work should be a priority because it's just the right thing to do. But thankfully, it is also the smart thing to do. Data, time and time again, including so much of the research we've done at Motives Met, shows when people's top motives are met, they are twice as likely or more to stay at their company now and for the long haul, for long-term retention, right? They're more productive, they're more connected, they're more collaborative. You get all of these great benefits when people feel that they're thriving and not just barely treading water at work.
Yeah. And some people are better at seeing, like noticing, right? I know really good managers are really good at seeing when burnout is happening, right? Or when something is going on. Others may not be as good at noticing because they're kind of focused on what they're trying to do. So I think some of it's just helping them see the bigger picture. It's not like you said, it's not like they don't care. It's just that their focus is somewhere else. And so I think, one of the things I would say to individuals is, you need to focus on your work-life harmony and your well-being at work. And how do you get engagement for that as a starting point? If you're not seeing it, how do you get engagement with your leader? Like, what can you do? I think you talked about a 5-step pathway, right? There's no easy process. There's no one size fits all, but there is sort of a pathway to improve your work situation. Do you want to maybe leave people with that? I think that would be a good way for people to think about this going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. When knowledge is power, that's the first thing I'll say. So I do love our assessment in the sense it really shines a spotlight on what matters most to you at work and why. But even if you don't use our assessment, you could look at our framework and decide a few motives that you really want to focus on. And it gives you an opportunity to go to your team, your boss, and take that internal reflection yourself to go, what are the actions I want to take? What are the boundaries I need to set? And we walk you through in the report that we give you, if you take our assessment, how to do this, how to develop your action plan, because that's the thing. A lot of times we can feel stuck or we can be unhappy, but we don't always know where to go next. And essentially we say everybody should have a well-being action plan in their life for their work, whether you're really happy at work and it's more of a preventative plan, or it's where I was years ago, where I was just down in the dumps and was miserable and didn't know where to go. That you really can step into your power. And it's a combination of very small and simple things. It's small habits, small asks. Because one thing a lot of people don't do is ask for what they need.
Yeah.
It sounds simple. I talk about this a lot in my book. You really have to get good at asking what you need from the people around you. And you'd be surprised if you do that in the right way and strategically and with good ideas and good intentions, how much support you can get. And of course, if you find that some of your top motives that matter most to you are drowning and they are going to continue to drown in this work situation, then it is time to look elsewhere. I will say the grass is not always greener. It is not always the first thing I tell people to do. Look at your current situation. A lot of times there's a lot we can do to make it better. But if it's not, I wish if I could rewind time and give my younger self advice, that would be it. You deserve to be happy at work. You deserve to thrive. And if you look at your top 5 motives and they are drowning, they are suffering, and they are not going to significantly improve in any way, it is time to go, and you are wasting your time staying where you are at.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, this, our well-being and that our brain in general is another muscle, right? It's just like any other muscle that we need to work on in our lives. And part of that means reflecting on and thinking about our situation on a regular basis. Like, what is it that's causing me not to thrive at work? And from there, what can I do about it?
Yes.
I think people would be surprised at how many people would be willing to, help them figure that out.
Yes, because we tend to take a much more passive and reactive approach than a proactive and preventative one. We wait until we're burnt out to a crisp. We wait until multiple team members are walking out the door of our company before we make a change. But prevention is always better than needing a cure. So it's really wanting to step into that power you have to be proactive, to make sure that you're keeping things healthy and that they're staying there. That's one of the best strategies for your well-being at work that you can do.
Yeah. And, for HR and for leaders, like, we need to do this for ourselves and then do it for others. It's kind of like put your mask on before you help others on the plane. Like, figure out yourself and then think about how you can support the organization in the same process. Because if you're asking these questions of yourself, then other people are asking questions of themselves, and they may not have the same access that you have to work on fixing them.
Yes, you are going to lead well-being better from a place of well-being than ill-being, right? You are going to be much more strategic, much more engaged, much more inspired yourself than if you're really struggling. So that is, whenever we meet with leaders and we talk about this, the first thing we go is, let's figure out what are your top needs. Let's figure out your top motives and what's your story behind them, right? We all have a story behind these needs and how they're connected and why they matter to us and what they mean to us. And once you develop that story and you really have this self-reflection of yourself, it opens your eyes in a different way when you start to hear people's stories on your team. And that's the storytelling piece is a really great way, like you were talking about. It's difficult for people to talk about this stuff at work. And it is, because it's tough to just walk into your boss's office and go, hey, purpose is one of my top motives, and I'm not that passionate about what I do anymore. Or you're micromanaging me and it's driving me crazy. My autonomy motive is not in a good place right now. But if we have these conversations where you're able to ask people really good and interesting questions related to their top needs and have them create their stories, and we share these stories with each other, which is a huge well-being driver. We feel seen, we feel validated, we have new perspective on others. It's a great way to get people to talk about these things that is sometimes difficult to have that brave space and that vulnerable space to talk about.
And I would think the ROI for getting some focus on this would be easy. I mean, I'm still like struggling over this 16% number that you said 16% of people are thriving. Well, I mean, what that says to me is, if I'm doing my math right, 84% of people are not, or haven't really thought about it. I don't know, but that's a huge number. And when you think about, again, how much time they spend at work, the ROI for focusing on this should be pretty straightforward.
Yes, it is. And the numbers, again, the numbers always, as a researcher, I always come back to that of like the data really tells a very, very clear picture that I think makes it difficult to ignore why it's so important and impactful. And it really does, as a leader, it feels really good when you see the impact you make. But like you said, I think what's difficult is so many leaders, it's not they don't care, they're time starved. They don't have the tools. Okay, I need to get my people to talk about this stuff, but like how, right? Like I'm not being given a process to do this or help to do this. So, and I'm trying to do a million other things. And hey, my own motives might be drowning and I'm struggling, so it's a lot. And that's why it's so important if organizations really want people to thrive. One of the big things we always say is you have to give leaders and managers the 3 T's: time, training, tools. If you don't give them that, then that's not going to trickle down to everyone else. That's not going to create that company-wide movement to care about these 28 motives and make sure they're healthy.
Yeah. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining me today. This has been a fun conversation. I hope people pick up the book because I think there's some really good support mechanisms there that will help people in this endeavor for sure. Where can people find you online and on social?
Motivesmet.com. We have a lot of great articles, our assessment. The book is available on Amazon. You get a free code to take the assessment with the purchase of the book. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Kelly Mackin, on LinkedIn and connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. I want to encourage you to take the survey for the HR systems research that is out. I'm sure it's out at this point. And if you haven't gotten a link from your vendor, check out sapientinsights.com. You can take the survey from there. Also, be sure to listen to Stacy and Cliff next week while they spill the tea on HR tech. Thanks to our producers, Brand Method Media Group, Kelly, and our marketing team, Summer and Mark, and you. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this week's episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd love you to subscribe. Also, send us a note or drop us a line. Let us know the topics you want to hear about. This is important to us, and we want to talk about the things that you want to hear about. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.